All right, I have a new book for us. Essential Jazz Lines in the Style of Charlie Parker for Guitar. This book is great for you if you are a guitar player and you're a jazz guitar player, but maybe bebop is a bit of a mystery for you, because bebop doesn't come naturally for us guitar players at all. It's a horn tradition, right? So if you are looking for material to improve your bebop playing, this book can really help you to do that. So I'm just going to show you, before I get into the book, I'm just going to show you how I work with this book. I'm just going to take one short little phrase from this book and play it over Blues for Alice. So I have my backing track here, Blues for Alice. And the lick I'm going to play is this. With volume, it's even better. So it's a lick that works over a so-called short 2/5. And in bebop, you find a lot of these short 2/5s, such as in Blues for Alice. Here. And especially here, where you have the chromatic 2/5s. I've talked about these before. This kind of thing is usually where we get into trouble if we haven't prepared for that kind of chord progression. So I'm gonna take that lick and just play around with it over Blues for Alice, and it sounds something like this. You get the idea. I just took that little phrase and just tried to play it here and there to help me get through those kind of tricky changes. Right, so let's backtrack a bit and go back to the beginning of this book. In the beginning, he kind of explains the stuff that you need, the kind of theoretical stuff you need to understand how this bebop language works. So guide tones and bop scales, which I have covered many times. And a lot of people ask me about fingerings for bop scales, because it's not clear how we should solve those on problems on the guitar. And so this book can help you with that. And then what else is here? Upper structure of chords and targeting, right? Targeting is a big thing in bebop, where you kind of target a note. That kind of is one of the secrets behind how you make it sound like bebop. For me, I kind of know that stuff already, so I'm just kind of skipping that. What I want to get to are the licks. So it starts off with just minor chord material. So this book works for intermediate to, not beginner players obviously, but beginner maybe jazz players or beginner bop players. And you can also use it as if you're a more advanced player. I'll get to that later in the video. But so here we have a couple of pages of just licks that work over a minor chord. And then the way you should practice them are over these minor chords, vamps, going through all 12 keys. That's something that most of us have practiced at some point. It's kind of the Jamie Aebersold stuff we do. I did a lot of that stuff when I was late teens, early 20s, I guess. So for me, it's not a problem to do that. But let's say I take one of these licks. Here's the one I really like. Very Benson sounding. I'm surrounding the third, the minor third, going up the arpeggio, and then chromatically down from the ninth. So I'm going to take that lick and play it through the all keys. So C minor. octaves. And then F minor. Maybe elaborate, expand on the lick. B flat. E flat minor. Alright, you get the idea. So this might be too easy for some of you. But if you're having, let's say you're doing that, and let's say E flat minor comes up and you're not sure where you are or where the notes are, that's not a good thing, right? That's then you really need to work on that, because if you look at the chord changes for Blues for Alice, there's a whole bunch of 2/5s, the A flat minor, D flat. What happens, I find, with some students is that they can play over a tune like that and they can make it sound good if you have a good tone, you have good timing, you have a bunch of jazz or blues sounding licks under your fingers. But if you can't outline those chords, the A flat minors and the trickier 2/5s, it's not going to be strong. Your playing is not going to be strong. It's going to sound like you're kind of faking it, which some players do. And you don't want to be the player that is faking it. So you want to make sure that you can play these licks in any key. It shouldn't matter. A flat or A minor should be as easy or as hard. Then obviously it's going to be, some keys are going to be easier for us. Then he talks about this one measure 2/5. So a couple of examples of chord progressions that you find in jazz are the 2/5-1, right? Every jazz book talks about that, and how they give you a bunch of licks that work over that. But they rarely talk about the short 2/5s. A good example of that is the tune Moment's Notice. So the long 2/5-1 licks are not going to work over Moment's Notice, right? You also need short 2/5-1 licks. So here we have a whole bunch of those, and then long 2/5-1 licks, a whole bunch of those. Let's go back to Blues for Alice. I'm gonna take another short 2/5 lick, this one. Okay, I'm gonna use that for the short 2/5s, but in the beginning of the tune, starts off with the F major, we have this, right? E minus 7 flat 5 to A7. That's a minor 2/5, a short minor 2/5. And a lot of books, they kind of overlook that. So, not this book. Minor 2/5 material. So let's find the lick that works over that. So if I use that over Blues for Alice, right? And then the other lick. Can you hear the changes go by? Let's play it over the backing track here. are just two examples of these licks. So now imagine that you work on a tune like Blues for Alice and you go through all these licks. Of course, some of them you're gonna like some of them better than others, and that's where your taste comes in. So when I cover this kind of stuff, there's always this thing that comes up that some people don't like it because it sounds like bebop cliches. The reason it sounds like bebop cliches is because those licks are bebop cliches. And some people are kind of afraid that, I've talked about this before, they're kind of afraid that they're gonna sound like everybody else if they play this stuff. And I don't think so. So obviously, if you're working on a tune like Blues for Alice, you should approach that tune from as many angles as you can. So you should try to play chord tones. And bop scales and all the rest of it. But these kind of licks are also important. And yes, they are cliches, but you want to master the cliches if you want to sound like you're playing bebop. Remember, it's a language, right? So just imagine that you are a teacher. Imagine that you're a teacher and you tell the student, learn a bunch of bebop cliches and learn how to play them over a tune like Blues for Alice. And one student goes, nah, I don't want to do that because I don't want to sound like Charlie Parker. I don't want to sound like those are cliches. I want to sound more modern, whatever. And then you compare that with another student that goes home and practices this stuff like crazy, comes back and kills it, like nails the changes with these kind of things, and then goes, yeah, I think I want to move on from this now because it's too obvious and I don't want to sound like a bebop player. Then that's how you impress the teacher, right? You don't want to be the student that sucks and goes like, yeah, no, I want to sound like Alan Holdsworth, or something. But I mean, Alan Holdsworth didn't play bebop. Alan Holdsworth didn't play jazz. So I totally understand that you don't want to sound like you're playing bebop cliches, but the way to get to the more modern sound is through learning how to play this stuff so that you can build from that. That's the way I look at it anyway. So some teachers might disagree and say that you shouldn't play bebop licks. That's that's something for you to figure out. But if you find that bebop is kind of a mystery, how does it work? This book is really, really good. Also, it kind of goes without saying that it's not enough to just work with a book like that if you're not listening to Charlie Parker, if you're not listening to bebop. You should be listening to it as much as you can. You should be transcribing solos as much as you can, and definitely learn the heads. Learn the bebop heads. Learn a couple of Charlie Parker solos. There's the Omni book. I don't really like the Omni book because it's just so uninspiring for some reason. I just never like that book. It's good to learn Parker solos, but I think it's even better if you transcribe them yourself. And now, let's say that you're more of an advanced player, and this stuff is kind of too basic for you. You can always work with this stuff anyway. You can work on really fast tempos. For me, it's not a problem to play the Blues for Alice in a medium swing tempo, but let's say Cherokee at a fast tempo. All of a sudden, I'm in trouble. I need stuff to play, just to get through the changes, right? Or another thing you can do is work on this stuff as ear training. Try to sing these lines over tricky tunes that have difficult changes. So if we take Cherokee, and I take a 2/5 lick here, which one should I pick? Oh, here's a good lick. Very Charlie Parker sounding. I'm gonna see if I can play that over Cherokee at a fairly fast tempo here. So it might seem a little bit silly, right? But I'm really kind of pushing my chops, and I have to see where my limit is. So these licks can be excellent for learning or practicing fast tempos if you're more of an advanced player. Then at the end there's a bit of an etude, or there's an etude where he connects different licks over jazz blues, bebop blues, and of course that's the idea. What we're not doing right now with this is we're not connecting the lines over the bar lines. That's what comes. That's the next thing we need to do. But first, you need to learn these licks. You need to have a bunch of them, and don't just learn from books. Write down the ones that you transcribe and come up with your own, or learn from friends, and you write them down and keep them in a catalog so that you can kind of work on tunes that you like to work on, like Blues for Alice, for example. And then just play these licks, but then eventually you will start to kind of connect them. That's also something you can work on, but that's for another lesson, connecting licks. So that might be a later lesson where I do that. But yeah, yet another book that I strongly recommend for you guys, and enjoy, and I shall see you next time.